so excited to talk Joe Musgrove right now. It's not even funny. We just finished up the wild card series. We're getting you set for the American League and the National League Division Series. Just baseball, new week. Jack, Peter, Aram. Again, our goal is for all three of us to be on every episode we put out during the postseason. If it can't happen, it can't happen. You'll get some assortment of the two of us. But all three of us are on here on Monday. No episode tomorrow. What we are going to do is we're going to walk through the wild card weekend that was, and then we're going to get into game one of the division series. After that, we'll recap game one, preview game two, so on and so forth. Do we want to start with Musgrove, or do we want to save that for the end of the wild card, Peter?
Let's do it now. It's the big story.
It's a huge story.
This is kind of the ultimate episode, as we like to call it, the ultimate.
Yeah, the ultimate. Aram, I know you've got some very strong thoughts on it. Can I put out Gary Cohen's thoughts on it before you go? I just watched it before you hopped on.
Really?
Yeah. So Gary Cohen thought the same way that I did. He said it reeked of desperation. I understand doing it down 4-0 in the sixth inning. If you lose, you're going home, but you better be right, Gary said. Gary Cohen, the TV voice of the Mets, he's saying this on SNY on the postgame show. He said, you better be right. They were not right. And it reeked of desperation. And that was, he didn't say Bush League, but he made it very clear. He thought it was Bush League. Those are pretty much my thoughts exactly. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it could have gone one of two ways, right? I think you see what Buck was trying to do if he really didn't believe there was something going on there, and it was just disrupt Joe Musgrove's tempo, disrupt the pace that he has kind of mounted, the momentum that he's created. But at the same time, you're going to piss him off. And the second he did the Kenny Powers sniff, it was like he knew it was over. It was absolutely over. They pissed him off, and that was it. That was it. And I know Codify put out some interesting numbers that after they checked Joe Musgrove, he actually spun the ball even better. The pitches at 3,000 RPMs and above were jumped. I think he only threw one or two before, threw a handful afterwards. So, I understand why they wanted to check it. I get it. But at the same time, it's one of those things where the system in place, I kind of trust that they're going to find whatever they need to find. And the guy was shoving. The guy was absolutely shoving. I'm not going to get into the details of the substances and stuff like that because Vaseline wouldn't do shit for anybody anyways, which I also thought was a weird part of this whole thing. Yeah. And there was a lot of history of Joe Musgrove's ears looking like that. So it reminded me of Luis Garcia last postseason, which was also super annoying because that was Garcia's coming out party and was like, it seemed like we were trying to find ways to invalidate it. Musgrove's already established himself, but this was a phenomenal start and we're finding ways to try to invalidate it. That's stupid.
And oh, by the way, Joe Musgrove has always been a really high spin guy. We've talked about him. He's got a 2,500 RPM fastball. Mm-hmm. He's one of the best fastball spinners in Major League Baseball. And his slider consistently flirts with 3,000. It doesn't get there, but it flirts with it. A couple of tweets from Devin Fink, who does great stuff pitching wise. Musgrove's average four-seam fastball spin to velocity ratio. Usually, on average this year was 27.5 RPM to miles per hour. His average last night was 28.3. Devin said, I would argue that is pretty reasonable game-to-game variation. Put simply, when a pitcher is amped, he will probably throw harder. When a pitcher throws harder, his spin rates will increase. Musgrove added roughly 1 mile per hour on all of his pitches last night. So, of course, his spin is up. He was just juiced, Peter.
Yeah. So on the surface, I remember we were talking in the group chat and I thought to myself, well, this is incredibly entertaining just on a viewership standpoint, like the energy that it created, the Joe Musgrove doing this. It was great television. So I'm never like that upset when it happens because at the end of the day, this is a sport and it's supposed to be entertaining. Was there a little bit of gamesmanship from Buck? Of course, trying to get Musgrove off his game. I understand why Buck did it, but I agree with you guys. It was pretty desperate move. Their team had one hit from Pete Alonso in the fourth inning. Like Buck was saying, I have to try something. So again, I get why Buck did it, but just in terms of what the substance was, they flashed Andrew McCutchen's tweet on the telecast. Like, this is the tweet from McCutchen. Here we go. I guarantee Musgrove had red hot on his ears. Pitchers use it as a mechanism to stay locked in during games. It burns like crazy. And I don't know why some guys thinks it helps them, but in no way is it sticky. Buck is smart, though, could be trying to just throw him off. Like, not only do I think McCutcheon was right about what substance he had on just to stay locked in, that it burns like crazy, but that's exactly what Buck was trying to do. Buck probably thought, well, I have an excuse. The spin rates are up. His ears are shiny, and we can't hit anything. So maybe he is cheating. But I think Buck knew this is a little far-fetched, and he wasn't cheating. It was obvious, let's stay locked in because it's the playoffs and I'm chucking as hard as I possibly can. But in totality, it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed it.
Really entertaining.
Oh, no. The worst part about it, though, the only part that is like, I had a couple friends over, like girlfriends over, and they're like, why is he touching his ears? And I had like a 5-second deliberation in my head. Like, do I really want to try to explain this? Because it's going to sound so stupid. No. And I gave the best Spark Notes explanation I could, but it just made me realize how weird our sport is. It's like, I'm explaining to these women why somebody's ears are getting felt up in the middle of a massive game in front of 39,000 people, which, by the way, was not a sellout in Citi Field. Not a sellout, which is honestly disgraceful. And that's coming from a Marlins fan who grew up with empty crowds. So I even think they find a way to pack it in when you are in an elimination game 3. I really think that you look at what happened there. I know it's a Sunday night. I know games are expensive. I understand all of that. I'm not shaming individual fans for not showing up and not paying to go. I just think that there's enough people in the city of New York, enough Mets fans to sell out that stadium. And it hasn't been a problem in the past. You look at a lot of the other big markets. It was pretty shocking to see them not sell out in a definitive game 3 after a win, where, you know, I would say going into this game, you could have called it a coin flip. I don't think anybody was saying the Mets were doomed. I think the Mets were favorites, right? I was shocked to see Mets fans not show up, and it kind of shows you just how defeated it seemed like the entire Mets fan base was after they didn't get the division there. It seemed like that at that point, they just were calling it. It seemed like that on Twitter, which is not always a great pulse of a fan base.
No, but Mets Twitter's brutal. Let's be honest.
No, it is. But at the same time, then you see, you know, what happens at the stadium. And there were points even in the game that Peter and I went to where I was like, I was expecting a little bit more intensity here from the fans. Yeah. I was expecting a little bit more, you know, desperation and whatever. And it was almost like they're playing with house money misery, where it was like, yeah, you know, we're used to being miserable. We'll see how it goes. But if we somehow win this thing, like, great.
Aram, didn't it seem like there was an impending doom?
That's what I said in the group chat.
Yeah, it was just, the energy was,
you could sense a finality there. It was like, you know, it almost felt like closing day in some ways. I don't know. It didn't seem like they weren't expecting to win that game.
As they somehow do. They were hopeful that they'd win, but they knew deep down that they would lose.
It's bizarre.
It was bizarre.
Were they even hopeful is my big thing.
I don't think so.
No, they seemed hopeful. I will give them hopeful. I mean, I don't know, what is it? They just knew they were going to lose and they hated it the whole time?
How is it not sold out?
Think about the conversations that you have with New York Mets fans, right? It's always about how miserable they are. Do you think they actually wanted to win that series? Let's be frank here. Do they actually want to win a World Series, or do they want to continue to lean into this? That they're
indulge in their misery. Absolutely indulge in their misery. And I think game 3 was a tell. I just cannot believe that game was not sold out. It floors me.
Was game 2 even sold out with DeGrom? It didn't look sold out when we were there. I mean, there was plenty of people there, but it didn't look sold out to me when we were there.
Attendance for game 2 is 42,156. That is a sellout.
Okay.
39,000.
But I gotta say, Aram, we were there. Not every seat was filled.
No.
So maybe they were bought. They weren't attended.
Going into the postseason, if you were to ask me in July or August, hey, what are the ballparks that don't sell out in a winner-take-all game in a series? I say Tampa and Miami, end of list.
Oakland.
Actually,
no. Maybe
they show up in Oakland.
Yes, they do.
I think they'd show up. Yeah, it's true. Especially even if you gave me from this playoff pool, like who isn't selling out, the Mets are far from my first choice.
Who is your first choice?
I mean, Atlanta used to be that way, but even Atlanta now, I mean, they're incredible. They sell everything out now.
Yeah. I mean,
San Diego's been unbelievable. LA is always going to sell out.
I thought we were going to see nonstop sellouts.
Could you imagine this shit in the Bronx? No way.
Would never happen.
No way. Would never fly in the Bronx. Are you kidding me? They'd be handing out. They'd usher people in off the streets to make sure they fill those seats, but it also would just never happen.
One thing, it wasn't all bad for the Mets. Like, your best pitcher, Jacob deGrom, showed up when you needed him to. He was excellent. He was shoving against a hot Padres lineup. I mean, the Padres crushed Max Scherzer. 4 home runs, first time he had ever allowed that in a playoff series. And then they got to Chris Bassett. This Padres lineup was firing on all cylinders, but Jacob deGrom came in and did Jacob deGrom things. So at least you have that. At least Diaz pitched reasonably well. I mean, you put him in game 3, and it looked like his arm was ready to fall off there. He pitched 28 pitches
the day before.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can't really blame that. And the hits by the San Diego batter, I think it was that Juan Soto double at the end.
Yeah,
that was off Diaz. I mean, that was a nothing. I mean, that was what a 65-mile-an-hour exit velo ground ball. So you can't blame Diaz either. Overall, they were good, but it was really only deGrom in this series. I mean, Lindor played pretty well.
I do agree with what Peter's saying. Like, you got to give credit where credit's due here.
Yeah.
The Padres played a phenomenal series. And
yeah.
Sure. Would it be nice if the Mets showed up a little bit more offensively? Absolutely. But, they did, hit a tough Blake Snell, who I would have picked out of the 3 pitchers they sent in the series, sent out there. I would have said, Blake Snell is going to have the best outing of everybody so far. That would have been my pick in foresight, because the way he's looked and also the way Mets have struggled against lefties, they grinded out Blake Snell. I mean, that was, again, that deGrom game was great. It seemed like that's the game they felt like, we can win this one. But the Padres played unbelievably well. They defended well. They obviously hit well, as Peter said. I think they did all of the small fundamental things well, and they obviously pitched phenomenal from the starters to the bullpen and everything in between. And I know, and we haven't brought up Trent Grisham yet, but it hasn't even just been Trent Grisham. How about like Austin Nola? And then in the big spots, you saw Soto come through, even more so Machado. This is what this team was supposed to be, right? And that's the thing. It's not like the Mets got upset by, even the Phillies, so to speak. I think this Padres team, when they're clicking, is way more talented than really any of the other teams in that range of the, win total department. The Padres, if they decide to put it all together, they could win it all. Like, that's the craziest part about it. None of us had faith that they would put it together.
Even without Fernando Tatis Jr. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, Ha-Sung Kim played an incredible defensive shortstop. He's done that for 162 games, and now he showed the world stage in a 3-game wild card series. Ha-Sung Kim's a really good shortstop. I love that this team is doing this without Tatis, because last year, the implosion of the San Diego Padres, a lot of people were trying to point fingers. And is it Manny Machado? Is he like still immature? No, Manny Machado is a proven leader. Yep. Is it the rest of the team not, being talented enough? No, that team is talented enough. I mean, look at Jurickson Profar. What he did as a table setter for this offense is incredible. I think so much of the implosion last year had to do with their poster boy and their franchise cornerstone being immature. He showed that immaturity tangibly with a failed drug test and a motorcycle crash this year. And I'm not saying they're doing it in spite of him. I'm saying that they found this great dynamic without one of the most talented players in the game. And that makes them that much more enjoyable to watch. And I think you can see that in Trent Grisham. This was a guy that absolutely fucking sucked this regular season.
Not wrong.
He was bad. And here we go. And if you named an MVP of the wild card series across any series that we have, of the 8 teams that we saw, Trent Grisham was the best player in the wild card series.
Oh, yeah. Not even close.
Awesome.
Maybe the worst player was Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah.
We'll kind of go rapid fire here between the other ones, but I mean, the redemption arc of Trent Grisham and Javier Reyes brought it up too. Like, this is somehow the second redemption arc in Trent Grisham's career already, and he's like 25.
He's 25. He's had the craziest ups and downs imaginable. Like, it's been cool to see too, because it's not just when Trent Grisham's hitting, even a little bit. I'm not even like a 750 OPS guy. If he does that for the duration of a season, he's a 4-win player, right? Like, he was a 2-win player this year, being the worst qualified hitter basically in Major League Baseball. This guy is still really good. And if he's clicking, I mean, we don't really have playoff F4, I'd assume, but from this series alone, I'd almost assume just 3 games, he probably accumulated almost a full win with the plays he was making in center too. I look at that catch on the Mark Canna line drive into right center, and I'm like, that's a tide turner, right? You're down 4, runner on base. You might score a guy there, or at least you have 2 in scoring position. And just like that, you can cut the lead in half with 1 base hit. Instead, it's an out. Runner stays at first base. Like, those are the tide turning plays that really define a series. And for me, I think that kind of shut the door. It was one of the few balls that were squared up all series long, or all game long, against Joe Musgrove. Last thing I want to say before we move on, because I do think this Padres team is clicking at the right time. And I believe in the pitching at this point. And I think the offense is good enough, but Jake Cronenworth, what do you do? Do you just keep rolling him out here against the Dodgers? 0 for 13 with 6 strikeouts. It's been a rough year for him all around, as is. They do have some other options. What do you do with Jake Cronenworth?
Probably go to CJ Abrams, right?
I think you just have to drop him in the lineup because he is good defensively. It's not like he's a hole over there and you're just relying on his bat. But I agree with you, Aram. It is a conversation because he was not good in the regular season. It's not as if, Cronenworth was the Crone zone during the regular season. He just had a tough wild card series. He'll bounce back. No, this has been a continuation of sucking.
Yeah.
To say it lightly. I mean,
at least keep him out against lefties, right?
Exactly.
Or something like that. Yeah, I think they got to think about it, right?
Because Profar at the top of the lineup has been great. Everyone except him. I mean, you move Grisham up, maybe move Nola up. Nola's been excellent. Like, I think Nola was the most underrated star here. Well, Grisham kind of got all the shine because he was great in center field and provided all that defensive boost. But Nola was great behind the plate, and he kept coming up with clutch hit after clutch hit.
Yeah.
Like, runners on first and second, it was always Austin Nola up.
Yeah,
and guess who's coming through? Austin Nola. It was
4
crazy.
hits in the series. 4 hits in the series. Again, yeah, I agree, dude. I mean, he came up clutch. Seemed like he was up every single time a runner was in scoring position. Austin Nola was up. And even, again, I always add my roommates into this because they're not big baseball fans, and then they'll accept me putting it on the top TV when we've got playoff baseball on, and they're like, "Who is this guy? Like, is he nasty?" I was like, "No." But when you don't have the context, it's kind of funny. You just get into a postseason series, everything's thrown out the door. My roommates think Trent Grisham and Austin Nola are 2 of the best players in baseball.
They are.
That's what's amazing about the playoffs and why it's so much fun. I will say Brandon Drury, only 4 at-bats this series. Jack, would you not eat into some of those Cron at-bats with Brandon Drury? I know he hasn't been dynamite in the second half, but I think they got to look at platooning Cronenworth at this point because the at-bats just look horrible. Yeah, he just doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I would platoon Cronenworth and Brandon Drury. There's no question in my mind. If you see a left-handed arm, it's Brandon Drury in the lineup here. And I don't think it's much of a debate.
One last thing. Padres bullpen, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Orahone, Arm and I were joking at the game. I think this guy's 23 years old still. It's actually unbelievable that he's still continuing to throw innings at such a young age. So I don't put a ton on him. But, I mean, Nick Martinez, Suarez, Josh Hader looked like the Josh Hader last night, 100 at the top of the zone with the slider. If they have these guys humming, they are dangerous because you have 3 horses followed by Suarez and Hader. I mean, that is Edwin Diaz out of Ottavino. That is what the Mets thought that they had. And then you have this Padres offense with Soto and Machado and Profar and the Trent Grishams and Nolas of the world. This is a really good team. This is a dangerous team going up against the Dodgers.
So what I will say is Buster only brought up a great point, and that's that Josh Hader has looked better for San Diego on longer rest. You don't get much rest in the postseason here. That was his first time throwing in 6 days, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, he's going to look great.
Looked elite.
Yeah. So what's going to happen when he throws on 1 day's rest?
Yeah.
We'll
that's true.
This is a good test for Bob Melvin too, right? And I'm very interested to see how he kind of handles all of that. One thing on Morahone, he debuted in 2019, Peter, and he is 23 years old.
Yeah.
So
he had a TJ sprinkled in.
Yeah, he did have a TJ sprinkled in, and he never threw more than 20 innings until this year. So we saw him in 3 different big league seasons, but he preserved his rookie eligibility basically as long as possible. I don't think he's obviously a rookie anymore, but he's just one of those guys that makes no sense. I was joking, like Sixto Sanchez could win Rookie of the Year next year, theoretically.
Yeah,
kind of in that same boat there.
I'm kind of in on that. All right, let's go. We can save like where do the Mets go moving forward to the offseason because that's an offseason conversation.
Yeah.
Let's go through each of the wild card series here real quick. I think that I'm very quick to say that a team won a wild card series instead of one team lost the wild card series, but it was pretty cut and dry. The St. Louis Cardinals lost this wild card series to the Philadelphia Phillies.
That's what I thought. I mean, just first of all, game one, implosion. They're Ollie Marmol, his bullpen decisions were questionable at best.
I mean, I don't blame him for going to Helsley, but Helsley for 5 outs.
Helsley for 5 outs when you know that he just got injured in that series already. He had a finger thing and you just kept him out there. And they kept panning in the dugout to Ollie Marmol. And he said, let him go, let him go. The command was obviously not there in the playoffs. This is do or die. You have guys warming up in the pen. Why don't you bring him in? He couldn't throw a strike. It wasn't even close. It's not like he's just off the corner, right? He's not a ball or two to the outside or just inside. He's throwing up and in, and these balls are sailing on him. Can't throw a slider. And when you have Yadier Molina giving you that enormous glove, being like, right here, man, you're 102, just right here, just throw it in the strike zone, and you're not even close, there is an issue there. And he kept him out for such a long time. And then that implosion. But at the end of the day, even when the Phillies hit the ball, they were just like infield grounders.
That's what I was going to say.
Through. And then in game 2, it was 2-0. We're going to talk about all this. I'm just doing that quick summary. It was 2-0. Nolan Arenado had a couple hard hit balls, but otherwise, this Cardinals offense just disappeared. Absolutely disappeared. I know you got to give Aaron Nola a ton of credit, kind of like we give Joe Musgrove a ton of credit, but the Mets disappeared and the Cardinals disappeared. That's what it felt like to me. Questionable bullpen decisions by Ollie Marmol, a disappearing act by the MVP and Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, Nolan Arenado at least hit the ball hard. Yeah. Paul Goldschmidt disappeared. He was a ghost. Houdini. It was so just, after all that.
Yep.
After all that, nothing.
Pujols showed up.
Yep. I was getting upset with Aram. I'm like, why are they hitting Pujols second?
They should have hit him leadoff.
Should have hit him third. Should have dropped Goldschmidt to 7th.
Yeah. 0 for 7, 4 Ks.
Corey Dickerson hit better than him.
Here's what stands out to me is there's a few different things that I could point towards to say, like, this is when you know you're fucked with the Cardinals. And I think the number one thing where I was like, okay, if this is how you lose, you just gotta eat it. It was in the same inning where Tommy Edman, it wasn't an easy play, but it was a Tommy Edman makeable play. He does not even smother the ball to keep it in the infield. That scores by him. Guess what happens right after that? Nolan Arenado, arguably the best defensive third baseman of all time, has a ball eat him up at third base. I mean, if you are losing because 2 makeable plays are booted by Tommy Edman and Nolan Arenado, fuck everything else. You're
not
screwed.
your week, man. It's not your year.
That's it. It's not your year. You're screwed. And that was really what it boiled down to for me. Of course, Ryan Helsley implosion. The management of that is one side of things. The MVP going 0 for 7, absolutely another side of things. And Aaron Nola, though, we watched him shove it up the Astros, on the last game or his last start of the season. Yeah. And he had just looked dynamite down the stretch. I was worried about game 2. I think we all were all along. That's what made the implosion in game 1 that much worse. We should be talking about a game 3 between these two teams, and who knows how that would have went at home with the Magic. That's where the Magic shines through. Put yourself in a position for that luck, for that, whatever you have going for you to kind of push you over the top. But it's not just going to do the work for you. And obviously the Cardinals found that out the hard way.
Real quick, what do you make of Adam Wainwright not sniffing them out?
I agree with it. He had dead arm.
His arm was dead.
He wasn't and it wasn't the starting pitching was not the problem. No. That's what was so crazy about this series. What were the Cardinals built on? Their incredible offense and their defense. What didn't show up? Those 2 factors. It wasn't really the bullpen. I mean, of course, Helsley had a little bit of a blow up. It wasn't great, but it wasn't.
Even the bullpen, I would argue the bullpen's one of their strengths too.
Yeah. But, okay, but I'm saying it wasn't the bullpen that lost series. Like, you got to score 1 run to win. Jose Quintana threw 5 shutout. Miles Michaelis at least pitched pretty well in that game too. Well. So, but I also, like, the Cardinals did. You can make the argument that the Cardinals did lose the series, and they probably did based on what they did in the regular season, and then what didn't show up in this 2-game series. But we have to give a ton of credit to Philly.
Yeah.
I mean, Wheeler looked like Cy Young. Nola looked like Nolan Ryan. I mean, and then the bullpen, I have been bagging, and I an apology is due from me. I've been bagging on this Phillies team all year. I banned them at the beginning of the year because I kept losing on them. And I kind of just discounted, put them to the side, never gave them the credit that they deserved. This offense is good. You get this offense rolling, they are tough to beat. They're so deep, kind of like what the Padres did, extending their lineup with Grisham and Nola. You go down the lineup, Segura. I mean, what a performance in your first playoff series. You go down the lineup, they can hit all the way through, even with Bryson Stott down there. And then the bullpen, I mean, guys, we've been bagging on it. Alvarado looked great.
He's been great. He's been great all year, man. The whole second half, Alvarado's been one of the best relievers in baseball in the second half.
Their bullpen combined with Nola and Wheeler, you didn't even pitch Ranger Suarez, who has had a phenomenal second half. Bryce Harper showed up in game 2. They are a very good team. I mean, we were giving the Padres all this credit for coming together and how dangerous they are. I got to say, the Braves are not safe here. The Phillies have a real shot to upset them. I would not be surprised if they did. When they're firing on all cylinders and you got those 2 starters at the top and the bullpen being key, and it's not like the Phillies made it defensive mistakes. We've been banging on the defense, thinking it's going to come back to bite them, and maybe it will against the Braves, but they played great.
It was the Cardinals.
Sound baseball. It was the Cardinals defense. Phillies played sound baseball, and they deserve a lot of credit here. This isn't just Cardinals lost and the Phillies somehow squeaked in. Phillies beat them, but the Cardinals played like shit.
Dude, Alec Boehm was making plays at third.
You look great.
No one Arenado's botching balls. Alec Boehm made some plays at third.
Hey, Boehm's been making plays for the majority of the year. It was the beginning of the year that he looked like shit.
I understand that he's still just like not a great defender overall. He's made huge improvements. And how about Bryce Harper though, showing up? Big home run. I think that really kind of set the tone for game 2. And the Phillies didn't need much else other than that. It's cool to see Bryce Harper going again, and I hope he's feeling better and healing up and at least as close to 100% as he can be for this series, because I want to see a full, fully healthy, locked in, intense Bryce Harper. That's the one silver lining here is, the first thing that came to my mind when I was watching the game 1 was, man, I don't want it to be the end of Pujols here. But then, Bryce Harper's in the on deck circle and they're showing him like, man, I want to see more Bryce Harper in the playoffs, So, and that's the good thing about series like this. And I would say I'm excited to see Bryce Harper in an underdog role, leading his team here, and it should be a lot of fun. Nick Castellanos too. I would love to see him do something special in this series, given the season that he's had. He didn't have a good series; he was 0 for 7. But I would love to see Nick Castellanos come up big. But to kind of piggyback off of what Peter said, in this Phillies team, it's another one. That's what happens when you get to the playoffs, right? All of these teams are really freaking talented besides the Rays. The Rays, I think, could be very talented next year, but what they put out on paper was brutal. All of these teams are super talented. If they come together, they can beat anybody. That's why we love sports in general. That's why we love baseball. And look, dude, I'm scared of a Phillies team that's clicking on all cylinders, especially with the 1-2 punch at the top.
Yeah. And Marsh, great down there.
Yeah.
Great. Hit 400 in the series. I know it's 2 games, but he hit 400 in the series.
Yeah. Let's jump to the American League wild card here. We'll start with Tampa and Cleveland. Cleveland won it in 2. Walk-off solo homer in the 15th from Oscar Gonzalez. Game 1, it was the Shanes, and it was Jose Ramirez that won him the game. I think it's so funny that Jose Ramirez was the entirety of the Guardian offense in game 1, and Oscar Gonzalez was the entirety of the offense in game 2, because those are the 2 run producers. Everybody else,
and Naylor, but Naylor didn't show up as much.
But I mean, J-Ram and Oscar, if you could line it up, 2 guys to get an RBI, if you went into any Guardians game the back half of the year and said one of these 2 is going to have the entirety of the team's RBIs, you think Naylor beats Oscar Gonzalez out for that? I don't think so. I think it's J-Ram and Oscar Gonzalez.
I do. I think it's Naylor, but I mean, it's those 3. I did think it was Naylor. I mean, he provided the thump all season long. He had a better overall year than Oscar Gonzalez is. Oscar Gonzalez is a rookie. So, I mean, that's why, Naylor's been there, and I thought he would have a better series, but he didn't need to. And I think the story here is how bad the offenses were, kind of on both sides.
Disagree.
But really, what I want to talk about is how good the pitching was.
Yeah, I totally disagree with you on how bad the offenses were.
No, that's what I'm hearing the story is. That's not what I think the story is. What I wanted to point to was how elite both sides were on the mound. the Rays bullpen, I know like the Guardians, it's tough to beat their offense, but this Rays bullpen was phenomenal. Glasnow looked elite. McClanahan looked phenomenal. And then on the Guardians side, Bieber looked like the 2020 AL Cy Young Award winner. Tristan McKenzie is becoming one of the best pitchers in the American League. And then you're followed up by Emmanuel Clase, who is as good as Diaz, better, maybe the best closer in all of baseball. I mean, he looks impossible to hit. The slew of bullpen arms from the Rays, just excellent pitching was more on display than bad hitting. They just went up against juggernauts on the mound.
Yeah, it's tough because I loved what we saw from Bieber. I would say two of my favorite pitching performances we've seen so far were Bieber and of course we saw from Tristan McKenzie, who South Florida kid that I've loved as a prospect for a long time, and it's cool to see it all click for him. And I do think he's going to be one of the better, I would say better number 2 pitchers moving forward in the league. I don't think people realize he's still 25 years old and still really learning how to control his extremely long levers, and his mechanics look really good. I think he's going to be a force for them. That said, and you can only pitch to who's in front of you. This Rays offense, I think, is the worst offense in postseason history, at least in the modern era. I don't even mean to be hyperbolic. I mean, you look at who they put forth here. It is half Durham Bulls. It is half Tampa Rays. I know this is what the Rays are built on, and I don't want to take anything away from Cleveland, but I do think if you go into a different series here against a team that's swinging it a little bit, I don't know if the Guardians win that series. Like, I think they pitched well. Don't get me wrong, but you've got to be better offensively. You look at what they did top to bottom. I do have concerns that against the Yankees, and I did pick them to beat the Yankees. I think the Yankees are going to blatantly outslug them, and that's the concern, right? If the Yankees ambush you with one swing in New York, sneak one out, even if it's a fly ball that sneaks out to the short porch, how are you coming back? What's a 2-0, 3-0 deficit look like for you if you're the Guardians? And I don't know how much confidence I have in them to climb back into it. I will say the Rays staff is really tough, but the Yankees have the ability to be very tough too. We'll get to that side of things specifically, but Isaac Paredes led the Rays in hits. He had 3 at-bats. He had 2 hits. Nobody else had more than 1 hit in that entire series for the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, that just can't happen. And I know I want to give credit to the Guardians, but at the same time, this offense is atrocious.
Jack, who are our X factors? Yandy Diaz, Randy Arozarena. Who didn't show up? Playoff Randy and Yandy.
So
neither did Wander either. I mean, the top of the Rays lineup, we're talking about the bottom and half it's Durham Bulls, but the Tampa Bay Rays side, 3 of the better overall hitters in the American League this year. I mean, Yandy was one of the best hitters in the American League. Randy, when he's on, you almost can't get him out, and neither of them showed up.
They were 1 for 19 with 9 Ks.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about Goldschmidt and Arenado not showing up. They didn't show up either, and it was gross.
So let's look at game 1 here. The top 3 in the order: Diaz, Franco, Arozarena. They were 0 for 12 with 6 punch-outs. After that, this is 4 through 9 with a couple of pinch hitters sprinkled in there that they ran out. Harold Ramirez, G-Man Choi, Manuel Margot, Christian Bethancourt, Taylor Walls, Isaac Paredes, Vidal Brujan, Jose Siri, who supplied the only run in the series with that solo shot off. Jose Siri. Yeah.
Elite.
The real X factor.
Faster.
The real X factor.
Yes. Now, I do want to flip it to Shane Bieber, because I just remember slamming the panic button on Bieber after his first couple of starts in April, saying everything's down, the shoulder is screwed up. He did not have his A stuff this year. The Shane Bieber of this year was very, very different to the Shane Bieber of 2020, where he was, across 9 starts, 12 starts, whatever he made, the best pitcher on the planet, and it wasn't close. This was not the same Bieber. The stuff was worse this year than it was in 2020, but Bieber still somehow put up a sub-3 ERA and still, through 7 2/3, a 3-hit ball, struck out 8. Shane Bieber's a bona fide ace. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball, and he's going to have one of these starts against the New York Yankees where we're talking about Bieber as a big dick dog.
Pinpoint command. Was placing it wherever he wanted to. It was masterful. It was Maddox-esque. It was, all right, I need a slider just off the plate. Bang, hit the glove. Like when you watch Austin Hedges' glove, wherever he's set up, not moving it an inch, just pop, pop with 91. But sometimes you don't need all the velocity. Like Bieber has learned how to pitch without the 93 that he had, maybe dropping to 90, 91. It almost doesn't look like it matters. It's like they just can't hit it. He's throwing it wherever he wants to. Masterful. Tristan McKenzie, masterful. But again, Rays lineup, that's why I'm interested. Was it truly masterful? That's why this Guardians-Yankees series, and we're going to get into it where we're predicting all these series where they're going to end up. But will they be as masterful against a much better Yankees lineup than what the Rays are putting out there? I think they will, though.
Here's the thing is, and this is the difference. They were both spectacular, and I think good enough to win any game against any team. But when you have the offense kind of looking the way it has for the Guardians, and again, I know it's a tough matchup, one mistake is the difference, right? You have Aaron Judge in the middle of this lineup. You have Giancarlo Stanton. You have other guys. One mistake could be the difference in the ball game, right? There's a guy on, you hang one, you miss one spot, you're down 2 runs. And right now it seems like 2 runs could be a lot for the Guardians. I'm very interested to see how they can grind out this Yankees pitching staff. That said, there's questions of who's going to show up for the Yankees too. And I think that's an interesting side of it as well. A couple of things that I want to hit on really quickly though. So good to see Tyler Glass now healthy and like beyond healthy.
Awesome.
He looked awesome. 8 whiffs on the fastball, 3 whiffs on the slider, and 4 whiffs on the curveball. Most impressively, I went back and watched, from a few different camera angles, just the difference between the slider and the curveball for Glass now, who never really like developed the changeup. He's a rare 3-pitch guy because the slider and the curveball are so different and it gives him 3 different looks. That was spectacular. And that was kind of what we were seeing before he got hurt of this, new and improved Glass now, who was already really good. He's going to take the league by storm next year. And I'm really glad he's healthy and kind of built that up a little bit to finish the year out. But I'm just really excited for this Rays team next year. I know that sounds, and we talk about that a lot, but I was mentioning this in the chat. I don't think there's been a team more decimated than the Tampa Bay Rays by injury. We talk about Glass now being out the whole year. Wander Franco was far from 100% and missed most of the season. Brandon Lowe was out basically the entire season and didn't get to play in this series. Kevin Kiermaier, I know he's not the biggest piece in the world, but hell, they could have used his bat compared to some of these other guys. Yeah, he was out. You don't have Zunino. You don't have Fairbanks, Fireisen, Nick Anderson.
Well, Fairbanks was there.
Fairbanks was there. Sorry, Kittredge is who was not there. Kittredge is who I could interchange all those names.
Yeah, and Kittredge was phenomenal. Nick Anderson, phenomenal. These are some of the best relievers in baseball when they're on. Exactly. These are incredible arms that the Rays are missing. The Rays were decimated by injury, and it looked like it.
And I think they get those guys back next year. Curtis Mead is a stud. He's going to come back and I think impact them. Josh Lowe looked great down the stretch. I'm really surprised they didn't put him on the roster with how good Josh Lowe looked in Durham and in the big leagues in some spots. It was a really tough year for the Rays. I'm shocked they made it this far, to be honest. I really am. And I think it's a testament to the way they mix and match. But yeah, I mean, this is the worst team in the postseason for sure. We all picked them to lose this series for a reason. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah. Tampa bullshit on 10 again. Durham just won the AAA championship too. So here we go. They've got the best farm system year in, year out.
I think they won 3 championships in the minors. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, they win at every level except for the major league level. And they win enough to get into the postseason each time. It's really hard to do. If you win in single A, double A, triple A, and you get to the postseason, but you just don't win it all in the World Series. Last one that we got to hit on, Seattle and Toronto.
Before we move on quickly, I just want to say Jason Adams' changeup looked like the best pitch of all time. Did you see that, man?
To get out of that jam?
Out of that jam, and just when he came in multiple spots, that changeup looked... I mean, there was a couple of pitches in this playoffs where I thought to myself, that is an unhittable pitch. Emmanuel Clase's cutter, Josh Hader's fastball up here, Wheeler's fastball up in the zone, and Jason Adams' changeup. Like, that's the breath I was putting that pitch in. It looked it looked like Devin Williams, but faster. It was crazy good. Just shout out Jason Adams. Unbelievable season as a reliever in that pen.
Well, you won't see another until March of 2023.
Nope. So. And he'll probably suck next year because that's what relievers are.
No,
he looked amazing.
He's a Tampa reliever.
True.
Let's be honest.
If he was on the White Sox,
Yeah, brutal. Okay, Seattle has more magic. Like, they made this weird deal with the devil that I don't know if anybody has ever made in their lives. So they win 4-0. I will totally give that to Luis Castillo and the timely offense. I mean, Cal Raleigh, big dumper. That's awesome. That's a great nickname that is coming to light here. But Luis Castillo looked like a playoff one, which was insane to see, and that makes the deadline deal so worth it.
Oh, yeah.
And then down 8-1 at one point, Seattle wins game 2, 10-9. That's magic if I've ever seen it.
One of the greatest comebacks in baseball history in the postseason, I think. Down 8-1, 6th inning. You finish the game 10-9. Are you kidding me? I had Blue Jays through the first 5 innings, and I'm just watching this game unfold, and it's, it's 8-3. Oh, it's 8-5. It's 8-8. JP Crawford. Little bloop. Bo Bichette, George Springer run into each other, and it's tied.
That's when you knew it was over, too. That was another one. That was another one of those defining moments. Those guys are rolling around. It's like 2 of their best players. You're like, it's over.
And I said in the TikTok and on the article, you are not beating this Mariners bullpen. And they could not beat the Mariners bullpen. They had one shot. It was getting it off Ray, and it was getting it off Castillo. They had absolutely no chance against Luis Castillo. Then they beat the crap out of Ray.
And how about this? How about the bozo over here with the black screen behind him who said Alek Manoah is the guy he's excited to watch pitch in the postseason? I mean, dude, I was like, here we go, Alek Manoah. I can't wait to watch him on the big stage. And I don't want to take anything away from the Mariners. I mean, this is a lineup that when they're clicking, they're really tough. But Alek Manoah has been their guy. And that was another one of those moments where you're like, damn, if Alek Manoah is getting knocked around, how are they winning this series? Manoah goes 5 2/3, gives up 4 earned runs, strikes out 4, walks 1. It wasn't a disaster of an outing, but I mean, this is the guy that's supposed to set the tone for the series for you. And I think we kind of saw the age, the youth from Alek Manoah. And I think, I don't think you can point the fingers at him. They blew a massive lead, but I was very excited to see Alek Manoah pitch, and he looked more like that 24-year-old making his first, big postseason appearance, which is okay. I think he's going to have some iconic postseason appearances as he, progresses through his career. But I think this kind of shows the vulnerability of this Blue Jays team is, a lot of their hopes to advance rode on the shoulders of a 24-year-old pitcher. And this is what can happen when you are set up that way.
Yeah, the trailer that Vladdy was talking about didn't have the
I saw that quote.
The full script of the movie in it.
Did you see that quote?
If you catch my drift.
He said last year was the trailer. Now you're about to see the movie. That was Vladdy.
And the trailer has all the positive aspects of it. You see Vladdy, you see Bo Bichette, you see Gausman with the splitter, you see Manoah at his best, you see a dominant Jordan Romano. But the trailer is often the best part of the movie.
Yep. And I thought I was seeing a comedy movie. I saw a horror film instead.
It was a disaster on all fronts. An absolute disaster on all fronts. Game 1, your best pitcher, Alek Manoah, gets crushed. And you don't hit. You're the Blue Jays offense. You are the number 1 offense, I think, this year in terms of WRC plus against righties. You're at least up there. You can't even sniff Castillo. He's 99 to 100 wherever he wants, and you don't have a prayer. And then Munoz comes in pumping 103 with that slider. Looked unhittable. I'm talking about best pitches. Munoz is everything. Castillo's everything. And then they finally get to Ray. And they almost got the monkey off their back where they couldn't really hit lefties as the season progressed. And then it just all falls down on the backs of the guy that they got at the trade deadline, Anthony Bass, 3 earned runs. Like these guys, former Miami Marlins, stand up Marlins. You won Aram, you won the Mariners a series.
I don't know what they thought they were getting here with Anthony Bass and Zach Pop. I mean, Anthony Bass was bad in every high leverage situation this year. He was great in the 7th inning tied games and whatever. But yeah, I mean, that was the thing is the Blue Jays bullpen had been pretty good, relatively speaking. But I mean, Jack,
really good to end the season, and it just.
Did you have any confidence, Jack, in this bullpen being able to really hold the fort down if the starting pitching isn't doing what it's supposed to do?
Adam Simber pitching in his 140th game of the season.
Seriously.
No, I like no hope
I did.
for this Blue Jays bullpen. So my thing is like they have some good spot performers here and there, but in a postseason setting, and I think that a lot of Blue Jays fans will say this, their shoulders will tense with pretty much everybody except Jordan Romano in a postseason setting here. And yes, they've got guys that are durable. They've got guys that go all the time. They've got guys that string together good outings. But the only one that is like a bona fide bullpen stud, my thought, was Jordan Romano here.
Yeah.
And
Who
if
had
you
a
know
10-8 ERA this postseason. 10-8. Yeah.
And if,
but it happened. It's 2 games. But
game one was the biggest tone setter ever, because if Alek Manoah struggles, you are in for a shit show.
It's over.
Series. It's over. And Manoah struggled.
Yeah.
So can we shout out some Mariners hitters? Because if they extend the lineup like this with Carlos Santana was hitting. Adam Frazier was hitting. Cal Raleigh hit 500 in the series. Eugenio Suarez. Like, it's funny. The top of the lineup, Julio Rodriguez, Ty France. Julio Rodriguez hit 143 in the series. Ty France, 200. I mean, they hit the ball hard, so you would expect them. They're going to continue to hit. But the production was not from Julio Rodriguez and Ty France. It was from Carlos Santana, Adam Frazier, Eugenio Suarez, Cal Raleigh. Even J.P. Crawford was clutch when he needed it. I know J.P. Crawford overall wasn't very good because, a lot of his hits were bloops, but they were hits. They fell. It was the bottom of the Mariners lineup, who looked like a bunch of rejects, honestly, in my mind, looked phenomenal. Crazy.
So
love baseball. It's awesome.
I think a lot of people latched onto the Mariners because they're fun at some point this year. But I think what was lost this year, obviously you look at the starting pitching and you look at Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, Kirby, who, by the way, closed out game 2. Kirby's got experience as a reliever. He showed it. And 99 on a corner was beautiful.
He's unbelievable. When he's coming in as a reliever and he could actually display high 90s. He looks unhittable because he's not going to walk you. He's just pinpoint with 99. It's crazy. This bullpen is so good. Like, Brash looked great. Diego Castillo looked great. Just great.
Well, I was going to say, I think what was most slept on was Eugenio Suarez was incredibly good this season. And we didn't sleep on it. Clay Snowden put out a great article about Gino Suarez, about a month ago or so on justbaseball.com. You can go read it there. But also Cal Raleigh, man. I mean, Cal Raleigh had 25 homers this year. So okay, Suarez and Raleigh stepped up, but they've been stepping up all year. Those two have been legitimate great pieces for the Seattle Mariners. And I know the batting average is low for Cal Raleigh, but I mean, look at the OPS for Cal Raleigh. He was a 750 guy. Look at Eugenio Suarez this year. He was about an 800, maybe north of 800 OPS guy.
Yeah.
Those guys have been good. West Coast baseball doesn't get much love unless you're the LA Dodgers. And Seattle, I think that they're really going to showcase to the baseball world who Suarez and Raleigh are.
And the Angels are going to be so good next year.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even see Kirby more than an inning, and we didn't see Logan Gilbert either.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the craziest thing, right? Is we're talking about 2 potentially lights out starters. I think Kirby, if he's locked in, can really rise to the occasion. We know Logan Gilbert has the ability to do that as well. He showed that down the stretch very much so. I will maybe talk about it when we preview the next series, but I think they've really got to consider whether they want Robbie Ray, taking the ball in one of the first 3 games, or whether they'd rather have Logan Gilbert or George Kirby do it. The amazing thing is they get by without having to make that decision or without having to rue the decision of going with Robbie Ray. They win with a bad Robbie Ray start in game 2 and have just a rested Logan Gilbert and George Kirby, who's rested too. He only threw that 1 inning. So they have a lot of ways that they're going to be able to mix and match here, a lot of different choices, especially since this series only went 2 games. And I love the position that the Mariners are in. Sure, they go in and play a team now that had some rest, but I'd argue that the Mariners are pretty well rested, relatively speaking. And I think they should be in a pretty good spot pitching wise for sure. It's really going to be about whether the offense rises to the occasion. But when you got Adam Frazier and Cal Raleigh combining for 6 hits in a game, you're usually going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we'll move on to the ALDS and the NLDS.
One more thing
going tomorrow. Yeah.
just about one guy who didn't pitch at all. Eric Swanson, who was their closer, I guess, even though they have 6 of them in their pen. He didn't even pitch either. Like, this Mariners bullpen is so incredibly deep. It's crazy. The only blip in it was Seawald when he gave up 4 earned, and that's super, super unlike him. I expect him to come back and pitch well. This is a dangerous team. Dangerous.
Yep. And now we can talk about them in the ALDS and the NLDS here. But before we do that, use code October15 on Just Baseball's merch site. Hoodies, long sleeve tees, hats, got a whole bunch of gear. October 15%
off.
Link in the podcast description.
Yeah. Help us out. If you're enjoying the content, get some Just Baseball merch. The quality, you will be impressed. That I can guarantee. 100%. Quality, impressive.